6 years if you want to. You can make it 8 years if you want children to learn for only 2 hours in a day. But the children can still learn 8 hours in a day within 3 years and pass if we teach them 8 hours and if we provide them teaching and learning materials for those periods.
But there is no denying also that we always have, in a particular academic year, teachers striking, students complaining of lack of learning materials or inadequacy of these learning materials. Speaking of maximizing the amount of time the students spend in school, are we performing in that regard?
That is exactly what I'm trying to communicate to you. Instead of increasing it to 4 years, and then you will have to construct one additional classroom for every school and look for one additional teacher in that classroom and then provide chairs in that class. And instead of that expenditure and then wasting the child's time by an additional 1 year, instead of that expenditure, we're saying that put that money into measures and mechanisms that ensure that teachers come to school early and leave at the time they are supposed to leave, that they prepare lesson notes, that they teach the full number of hours they are supposed to teach, that you don't have long holidays, that you don't use teachers for all sorts of national assignments that disrupt academic work, that you don't run sandwich programs and etc. that conflict with the timetable of teachers who are actually teaching, so that they spend half of the time doing their own courses in universities and the other half just teaching. If you take out all these bottlenecks and you maximize the time that the teacher actually spends, and you deal with issues of teacher accommodation, so the teacher doesn't stay so far away from the school that it takes him a long time to get to school and invariably getting there late, and he is in a hurry to leave early so that he can get home and therefore missing the last 2 lessons of the day. If you deal with all these issues and you embark on your national program for rural electrification so that teachers agree to stay in rural areas where the schools are sited, and you deal with their transportation issues, if you deal with all these issues within the 3 years,
right,
they will be able to perform very well. You understand?
My question actually was, are we dealing with these issues?
We are. The last 4 years, we've been dealing with the issue of teacher motivation. We have implemented the single spine salary structure arrangement. There are still some outstanding issues, but it's a work in progress. If you go around many of the secondary schools, you will see that we are constructing, sometimes 3-story, other times 2-story, 6-unit flats, on the campuses or near the campuses, so that teachers live near the campuses. There are so many interventions that are taking place to make sure. We've talked to the universities to realign all the sandwich programs so that they don't conflict with the teaching hours and the academic calendar in secondary schools and the primary schools. All these are measures that when we implement them fully, and we work closely with the teacher unions, and they also help us to get their teachers to do their work, we will be able to achieve maximum results within the 3 years at a lower cost to both parents, government, and the children in terms of the number of years they spend in school.
Right. Now, speaking of outstanding issues, here is NAGRAT saying the ministry is delaying in handing over its second-tier pension scheme to its appropriate management. In fact, they have described it as an interference in the management of its funds. Really, is the ministry aware of something as this, and what will be your reaction?
I mean, there is some effort to coordinate the management of the pension fund, the second-tier pension funds. And this is an across-the-board measure program, which is coordinated, I believe, from the Ministry of Finance. So it's not just Ministry of Education. I think it is across the board to coordinate the way that these funds are managed. And so I am at a loss what the issue is, because as you would know, the law, as I understand it, vests the management in, I think, the service, and the service itself is under the supervision of the ministry, and take policy directions from the ministry. So it will be very strange when the ministry is issuing those policy directives for somebody to say that the ministry is interfering, because the ministry is ultimately responsible for the management of the GAs and all the agencies and departments under the ministry. So the ministry can't give policy directives, and GS is directly responsible.
Right.
And the finance ministry is trying to coordinate for all sectors so that we can make the right kind of decisions and not endanger the pensions of people.
Absolutely. I'm very grateful for your time already, but I'll be more grateful if you held the line for me. I would want you to react, if you will, to the Coalition of Concerned Teachers. Indeed, we have one of their members, actually the Communications Director, Ali Awudu, who's joining us in the studio in a bit. But I want you to hold the line for me whilst we take NAGRAT's, really, their comments they made about the handing over of their second-tier pension scheme to the appropriate management. Now, the National Association of Graduate Teachers has expressed worry over government's delay to hand over the second-tier pension contributions of the Ghana Education Service workers to the administrator of the Board of Trustees set up by the association and other educational workers. President of the association, Christian Adai-Poku, in an interview with Joy News, indicated that the second-tier pension scheme is supposed to be managed by a private entity as mandated by law, and government has no business interfering in the management of these funds.
According to NAGRAT President Christian Adai-Poku, the implementation of the second-tier pension scheme for educational workers is 3 years behind schedule, complaining government has been very sluggish in addressing the situation.
The National Pensions Regulatory Authority has not been able to give them the authorization to be able to start operating the scheme. But the next 2 years, some workers are going to retire who are supposed to benefit from the new scheme. And the new scheme should have been in operation for 5 years before people start benefiting.
The association also accused government of attempting to unduly influence the National Pensions Regulatory Authority not to hand over the funds to the board set up by the GES workers to administer the funds.
The Board of Trustees was appointed by NAGRAT, TEU, and Ghana Education Service. But information reaching us indicate that government is trying to take over the scheme from workers. And that is what NAGRAT is saying, that we will not agree that government should take over the scheme. We know how government has interfered so much in the existing pension scheme. And that is one more reason the new Pension Act was passed. And when it was passed, it stated clearly that the second-tier pension scheme is supposed to be privately managed.
NAGRAT is therefore cautioning government to cease interfering in the operations of the scheme. He said such actions by government will be stiffly opposed by members.
Government is accountable to the people. It is the people's power that makes government powerful. And so we believe that we will make our statement clear, and we will resist any attempt to take it from us. Any legitimate means under our power to make sure that what belongs to teachers in this country is not taken over by government, we will do it.
NAGRAT is also hoping the National Pensions Regulatory Authority will hand over funds to the Board of Trustees set up by the GES by the end of November to expedite work on the pension funds of members who are due for pension in 2 years' time.
Right. Thank you very much, Honorable Mahama Yariga, for staying on the line. He is the Deputy Minister of Education. And you have had NAGRAT's version of the story. Do you still have anything more to say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we are listening carefully. We are all very, very concerned and want to ensure that the pensions are properly managed so that when people retire, they have something to look up to. And so I don't think that there's any disagreement in terms of the ultimate objective. And the government is not, as you know, they are trying to misrepresent, take control. As you know, there's a National Pension Regulatory Authority, and the authority, as I mentioned earlier, is trying to coordinate the process for ensuring that the most efficient private companies actually take over the management of the funds. The funds are not to be managed by any government agency. It is going to be privately managed, but we are all interested in making sure that the private entities that do manage are the most capable to guarantee the workers their pension when ultimately they retire. So I think we are all on the same wavelength, and I don't think there's any cause for concern. As usual, we will continue our dialogue with the unions to make sure that all their issues and interests are addressed so that we don't endanger the pensions of teachers, and not just teachers, but all other public service workers.
So when will this handover take place?
It's not about handing over. I think it's about making sure that the appropriate and most efficient and capable private companies are put in charge of managing the funds. So it's more about the process for determining the most efficient private company. It's not a question of handing over to anybody. Government is not supposed to be keeping the money. That is well known. The question is, how do you determine the most efficient private company that will manage and not endanger the funds of workers? Government is very interested in that, and the unions are equally very interested in that. And I think that working together, this shouldn't be a difficult issue to deal with.
But then again, this morning, we still have more issues regarding teacher conditions. Now, the coalition of concerned teachers have begun a strike action. In fact, a school has been abandoned because there are no teachers to teach. These teachers are complaining poor service of conditions. They are complaining about the fact that there are no learning materials. Salaries have been slashed, and then again they are calling for the immediate release of capitation grant to all public schools. They have also asked for a resumption of negotiation of the market premium, which is a key component of their single spine pay policy. Really, what is the ministry's reaction to this?
I mean, these are all matters that are being dealt with, and I'm surprised that the group that you are mentioning have decided to abandon teaching. I mean, clearly, it is one of the issues that I mentioned earlier. When we all behave this way, even if you make the teaching hours 10 years, I'm sure that children will still fail. If teachers just walk away from classrooms on the slightest provocation or on the slightest failure to meet a demand that they make, then you can imagine what will happen to our educational system. So I think that these are issues that are being discussed by the appropriate authorities. And so some of the measures, some of the actions that they are taking may be totally unnecessary. And they know that our doors have always been open. We have dialogued on all these issues to try to deal with them based on the resources available and the competencies of the ministry and GES. And they know that all these issues will be dealt with. It is absolutely unnecessary for some group without going through due process on the slightest provocation to just declare that they have abandoned the classroom. I'm not sure that if we are teaching a private school, we will behave that way. But be that as it may, that's been the main challenge that has confronted us in terms of the management of the public sector. So mine is to appeal to them that is not the route to go. There are processes for dealing with complaints. There are remedial measures that would be taken, and I urge them to respect all those processes instead of abandoning the classroom and further jeopardizing the future of our children.
Before I let you go, at this point, what does the ministry intend to do about this?
All those issues I told you are being addressed. For instance, the issue of the market premium and etc. Those are matters that are not dealt with by the Ministry of Education. Those are matters dealt with by the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. You see, that's the issue. People don't understand the borders, the zones of responsibility. the financing issues, the salary negotiations, and etc., are not done by the Ministry of Education.
But your teachers are not teaching either.
You see, but that's the problem. These are negotiations that their unions are supposed to be having with the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. And I know that the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission has been working with them. So you could call the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission for their own take on what is happening, and they can be giving you further and better particulars regarding where negotiations have reached, if there are any bottlenecks, what the bottlenecks are. And I think that is the way to go. And I know that the negotiations are taking place with the main unions, that is NAT, NAGRAT, and etc. I'm not aware of the role of concerned teachers in this whole process for them to be the ones to declare a strike. I'm not sure whether they even are seized with the facts on the ground regarding where negotiations have reached for them to be declaring a strike.
Right. Thank you very much, sir, for holding the line for me. Mahama Ayariga is a Deputy Minister of Education, but that is not the end of the conversation. We are joined in the studio by Communications Director of the Group Coalition of Concerned Teachers, Ali Awudu. Now, you heard the Deputy Minister. It is an unnecessary move. You should have gone through NAT. And NAT is already negotiating with Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. So why?
Thank you very much. You see, people shouldn't come out to make statements. They shouldn't come out to talk if they don't have the facts. Of course, the deputy minister said that he is not in charge of negotiations. So if he admits that he is not in charge of negotiations, then he does not even have the right to say that this case is what? Unnecessary. He should have first find out from the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission the effort that has been made, and after he has been briefed, he will then come back and find out whether the strike action is necessary or unnecessary. Now, very simple. On the 12th of July, 2011, the Coalition of Concerned Teachers sent a letter to the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission requesting them to commence negotiations on the market premium. NAT also sent a letter to them. Then in March this year, our national president and our national general secretary met Graham one-on-one. Then Graham told us that in the first week of April, they are going to commence negotiations on the market premium. Then during the first week of April, Graham came back and told us that because of the Easter festivities, they have shifted the negotiations to the end of April. We have followed them and followed them and followed them and followed them, and here is where we are. Now let me tell you something. The deputy minister was saying something. You see, people should not come out to talk if you don't have the facts. Upon the implementation of the single spine, there's nothing like bargaining certificate. What we have right now is collective bargaining. What you should also know is that the Coalition of Concerned Teachers is a registered trade union with the registration number RTU/78. So we have the same legal powers as the NAT and the NAGRAT.
Right,
and therefore, so he cannot say that he doesn't know the role of CCT. He's making a very big mistake.
Where does NAT come in dealing with issues of teachers as far as the coalition is concerned?
What the coalition is concerned is that we are a teacher union. NAT is also a teacher union. Note that NAT has the largest membership. We have about 50,000 members. NAGRAT has about 20,000 members. But NAT has over 100,000 members. So no doubt they are the largest. Are you getting what I'm saying? But the fact on the ground is that we are a union. NAT don't take decisions for us, and we don't take decisions for NAT. We are working for the interests of teachers as a whole. We have come out to declare strike because we think that the market premium is long overdue. Not only that, there are teachers that has been promoted from, for example, senior superintendent to principal superintendent, and for 1 year, 2 years, they have not been put on the correct salary scale. There are teachers that has been posted, newly trained teachers. They have been posted, and they have been working for 1 year, 2 years or more, and they have not been paid. Our pay slips doesn't come. So when you go to the bank, whether it is the bank that have cheated you or it is government that have cheated you, you don't even know.
Right.
And we have written letters upon letters to the various agencies, and they are not acting.
Granted, our sources from the Ministry of Education make us aware that when it comes to the pay slip issue, the Accountant General's Department has written to you to give you reasons why you haven't hatched them. Is this true?
This is not true at all. In February this year, for example, our General Secretary wrote to the Controller and Accountant General informing him that there has been discrepancies in teacher salaries. Every month, for example, if I'm on the same salary scale with you, I hold the same certificate with you, what it means is that whenever salaries are paid, our salary should be equal. But you realize that there is always differences in salaries. Now, let me also correct something here. The minister said that we have not followed due process. And of course, the minister, excuse my language, is not on top of issues. On the 1st of November, we wrote a letter addressed to the Labour Commission, copied to the Ministry of Education, copied to the Ministry of Employment and Social Welfare, and then copied to the Ghana Education Service that if the following issues are not addressed by the 12th of November, we will embark on strike. Now, the Labour Act, I hold the copy in my hand. The Labour Act says that if you want to embark on a strike, you write a letter to the Commission, inform them 7 clear working days.
Absolutely.
That process we are following.
Again, our sources of the ministry say you're supposed to have a meeting with the National Labour Commission today on this intended strike, not on your strike action, which you have embarked on already.
The issue is this. We wrote a letter to the Commission.
It makes your strike illegal.
The strike is not illegal. I'll quote certain aspects of the Labour Act and realize that what you are doing is not illegal. But let me react to the question that you asked. We wrote a letter to the Commission informing them that if by the 12th of November nothing is done about ABCD, we will go on strike. Up to the 12th of November, we had nothing. It was yesterday that they called our national president on phone to come and pick a letter at the Commission so that we meet them today at 12 noon. Just look at that. So by the time the Commission called our national president yesterday that he should come and pick a letter so that we meet them today at 12 noon, the strike has already been declared on the 12th and the teachers were already on strike. It will therefore then take some time before we can go back and call off the strike. I hope you are getting my point.
Wrapping up, we've also hedged that if you do not go back to the classroom, 1, you will not be paid, and 2, if it exceeds the number of days you're supposed to stay out of the classroom, the necessary action will be taken against you.
The Labour Law Act 651, subsection 63(1), unfair termination of employment, that the employment of a worker shall not be terminated if the worker has joined, intends to join, or has ceased to be a member of trade union, or intends to take part in the activities of a trade union. What we are doing, we are taking part in activities of a trade union.
Will you go back to the classroom based on this?
Nobody has the right to terminate any teacher's employment just because the teacher has embarked on strike. Nobody can do that. Per the Labour Act of this country.
Will you go back to the classroom?
We will go back to the classroom if the issues are addressed. For example, after the time I was coming to this studio, the president called me that he has received the letter. And so far as he has received the letter, whether there is time or there is no time, he has to mobilize people to go and meet the Labour Commission this 12 noon. What it means is that we have a very little time right now, but they will meet the Labour Commission, whatever the outcome be. The president on my way also told me that.
So you're already meeting the Labour Commission?
Yes, the letter said 12 noon. And by the letter, the deputy minister or the minister of education is also supposed to attend the meeting. The Foreign and Science Commission boss is also supposed to attend the meeting. And then the Ghana Education Service boss is also supposed to attend the meeting. So of course, there's going to be arbitration. If something good comes out of the basket, we'll go back to the classroom and teach.
Until then, the students would have to suffer for it. Thank you very much, Ali Awudu, his communications director.
Ali
Awudu, his communications director for the Coalition of Concerned Teachers.